Ciao a tutti, benvenuti al tavolo italiano. Welcome to the Italian table and to the fourth video in the series of tips on studying Italian. Starting with the next video, we start getting into the how-tos. Before we do though, there's one more subject I think we need to cover, and that's our goals and our objectives in learning Italian. So we know how to apply these how-tos. I tried to organize this series much the way I like to organize a class, laying a foundation and then building precept upon precept on top of that foundation. We started off this series, of course, with the introduction to the series, letting you know exactly what to expect, kind of rolling it out there, just so you knew what the series would be about. Then we talked about the first mistake, what I believe is the first mistake. I chose to do that one next because I knew that some of you would already be starting or already are studying Italian. And so I wanted to make sure that we covered that topic right away so that you could avoid that pitfall. The next video was on being realistic. And we talked about being realistic, about not being too hard on ourselves. We're going to make mistakes. To be realistic in that whatever goals you set, it's going to take the appropriate amount of time. It does take study. I used to tell people in the classes I teach, if I could just lay my hand on your head and say, learn Italian, that I would, but I would probably be very wealthy and very popular, and unfortunately I can't. And also to be realistic in that you need to enjoy the journey if you're going to stick with it. And to try to learn how to cherish what you learn and let that drive you forward. Now in this one, we're going to be talking about setting goals and objectives. This way, once we start getting into what we want to do with our Italian, the goals, the methods that we take, the resources we decide to obtain, they correspond with what it is that we're trying to accomplish. So, let's get started on setting our goals and objectives. So the first thing that I like to ask people when they decide they want to learn Italian is, what made you decide to be interested in learning Italian? That right there is a big factor in how we set our goals and objectives and what we decide we want to do with it. I've heard a myriad of reasons for why people want to study Italian. Amazingly enough, even though Italian is spoken in few countries as an official language, nowhere near like French, Spanish, or English, or even some of the other languages, it's the fourth most popular language to learn. Very, very interesting. I think because it's a beautiful language, it's a beautiful culture, and it can be a fantastic experience. So here are some of the reasons that I've heard. We're going to Italy, and I want to be conversational. Or, we're going to Italy, and I want to be able to order dinner, at least. Or, my grandparents or parents were Italian, but they refused to teach us Italian because they wanted us to be American. And I want to get in touch with my ancestry. Another one was, I love the thought of Italy, the culture, the language, etc. I've heard, I just thought it would be a beautiful language to learn. I just met an Italian man or woman, etc. Or, I have relatives in Italy and I want to be able to communicate with them. And the list goes on and on. It's almost endless. So there's a lot of fantastic reasons to want to learn Italian. So having said that, I think it's really, really important to keep in mind why you wanted to learn Italian in the first place when you look at your goals and objectives. I'm sure you've heard the saying, to thine own self be true. So look at what it is that you want to do and then set your goals and objectives accordingly. And, for me, I think it's very important to keep this in mind. And it's okay when someone came to me, and because I like to teach the grammar, I really like to dive into the language. I find it incredibly interesting, and believe it or not, Before studying Italian, I never approached anything like this. This has kind of taken me by surprise. But I just fell in love with this language. But when people came out and they said, Carlo or Chuck, it's a beautiful language, you do a great job, I really don't want to learn all that stuff. I just want to know how to say a few things. And you know what? That's okay with me. That's why we started the workshops called the Divertente series. They're not going to tell you why you say certain things certain ways. It's just enough to get by, just enough to communicate, and that's all right. That some people want to do that. That's a very, very valid goal. While other people really want to master the language. I mean, they really want to get into it, and that's all right also. But you need to look at why you wanted to learn Italian in the first place when you start setting your objectives. So, what could your objective be? Your objective could be that you want to be fluent someday. Your objective could be that you want to be able to order dinner. Your objective could be you simply want to be able to communicate on the most basic scale. So let's go back and look at some of these reasons and line up some of our objectives with some of the reasons why we wanted to learn Italian. We're going to Italy, and I want to be able to be conversational. Well, if you really want to be conversational, that's different than just wanting to be able to communicate. Wanting to be able to communicate is asking directions or just saying the most basic things. But to be conversational, that's where you want to be able to sit down next to someone or stand next to someone, have an espresso, and strike up a conversation. Who knows where it may go. It requires vocabulary. It requires a certain amount of fluency. So your objective would be to become possibly near fluent, conversational. We're going to Italy and I want to be able to order dinner. Okay, so in this case, you want to be able to memorize some phrases perhaps, just the basics, and to be able to understand hopefully a few questions that they may ask you in return. My grandparents or parents were in Italy and refused to teach us Italian. That one your objective would be to really go in depth into the language and to where you not only learn how to speak it, but you learn about the language. So it'll teach you a lot about Italians in Italy in itself. I love the thought of Italy, the culture, the language, etc. Once again, probably another reason to really go for it, to be fluent. However, this one might have a different time stamp on it. Because you're not going to Italy, or you're not planning a trip on Italy. You might want to take it slower, have the same end objective, but with a much farther time frame in mind, so that your focus is more on the process of the learning, really emphasizing the enjoying the learning part of it, etc. And like I said, you're the only one that can determine what your objective ought to be. And once again, that old saying, to thy own self be true, really think about really what you want to do. Now, there is a chance that once you get started, you might change your objective. And that is absolutely acceptable also, of course. I mean, it's your life. Why not, right? If you decide, if you're just going for being able to order dinner or the basics of communication, but you just fall in love with the language, you might decide, you know what, I want to take this a step further. Or you might say, well, I want to be fluent in Italian, and then you start studying and you realize, this is just going to take a little more commitment than I'm ready to make. And that's absolutely okay as well. Remember, it's your journey. You set it. So now that we've looked at the objectives, let's talk about our goals. See, I think that, to me, a goal doesn't have any teeth to it if it doesn't have a timestamp. If it needs to be something measurable. Now, once again, to thine own self be true applies with goals. And this really depends on the kind of person you are, okay? Now, if you're just a real go-getter, let's say you're the kind of person that has multiple degrees, you're very successful in life, you drive, you're just driven, and everything you do, you're passionate about, and you just go out there and you get it. Then, in my opinion, for you, that statement, to thine own self be true, would bring me to another statement where someone said, a man's goals should always be just a little bit beyond his reach. Push yourself. Don't be too easy on yourself. If your manner of personality is that you love a challenge and you really want to go for it, then challenge yourself and reap the benefits of that. However, if you're more like me, where it's easy to get discouraged because you look too much at where, well, I'm never going to get there. Maybe like me, you have a collection of hobbies or passions in the past that have never been truly fulfilled. Maybe an instrument that you never mastered. You could play okay, but you never really met your dream. Or who knows? I mean, the proverbial treadmill that sits in the corner that has never really accomplished what you purchased it to do. If you're more like that, then allow yourself the luxury of the little victories and set your goals where you know that you can hit them. And I would start by setting smaller, short-term goals so that if it becomes too easy, you can bump it up a little and keep bumping them until you're at a comfortable pace where it drives you a little, but you're able to meet them. You've accomplished it. Now you move on to the next goal. That's the first recommendation I would make in setting your goals that bring you towards your objective. Now, of course, the other thing to keep in mind is if your objective has some sort of a time stamp on it, then you want to set your goals accordingly there too. A lot to keep in mind, but the most important thing though is your personality, the type of person you are. If you don't set your goals accordingly, then you're probably going to get discouraged. And once again, we want to avoid that discouragement. We want to keep the process enjoyable, but at the same time being realistic and understanding that it's going to take some time. It's going to take some effort. So decide what you want to do and make a commitment to it. Now, the other thing I want you to understand about setting goals, or that I want you to think about when setting goals, is I would like you to think about goals a little differently than most people think of them. Most people would think of, I want to become fluent in Italian as a goal. Well, you can. I like to look at that as more as an objective, more of an end result. And I might even be going outside the box, the traditional or even the proper or technical definitions of goals and objectives. But the reason why I say that is because I want to become fluent. If I put a time on that, I may not necessarily be able to control all of that. There's a lot of things that can come into play, and if that ends up being my goal, until I hit that, I don't have that victory of hitting that goal, number one. But number two, it might take me longer than I think for a variety of reasons. People learn at different paces. I remember my first 2 or 3 years of study, and I'll be honest, when an Italian spoke at a regular pace or even a little bit slower than a regular pace, if they went outside the norm of a few set words, a little bit of dialogue, I really had trouble understanding them. Got to the point where I began to think I was never going to learn the language. In fact, to be honest, I can't pinpoint exactly when my comprehension began to catch up with the other aspects of my learning Italian. I do remember standing behind a restaurant talking to an Italian waiter in Charleston, South Carolina. And he was from the Puglia region, I believe, and we were standing there talking in Italian, and all of a sudden I realized, I understand this guy. I'm thinking in Italian. It was almost like an epiphany to me. It was, and I'm not real sure how or when that happened. I know I just kept plugging away until it did. Now, I didn't catch everything he said, but I was able to converse with him, and ever since then my comprehension has been growing. So instead of looking at goals as I want to understand 50% of what an Italian says, or I want to become fluent, I prefer looking at goals in another way. And let me give you another example of how I view goals and objectives, okay? One of my objectives with Il Tavolo Italiano is one day I would like it to be the most comprehensive system online to teach people Italian or to teach Italians English. I'm nowhere near that now. I'm a bleep Think about it. If Italian's the fourth most popular language to learn, first is English and Spanish, then French, then Italian. It amazed me that Italian was before Chinese, before a lot of other languages. But if it's the fourth most popular language to learn, I gotta believe easily that 1% of Americans would love to learn Italian. That's 3 million people, okay? I have a couple of thousand people following me on YouTube, and a few thousand more on Il Tavolo Italiano. It's a bleep. I'm a speck of dust, okay? And even what I have structured is nothing compared to what I would like to see it be. That's my objective. I don't want to be good. I would love to have the best website, the most comprehensive, all-encompassing website online on studying Italian and English. And once again, like I said, I am nowhere near that. So that's not really my goal, because I can't say I want to do that by. A lot of things I can't control. I don't know what the other websites are going to do. I don't know what emergencies are going to come up in my life. But what I like to set as goals is I would like to make X amount of videos a month, or create X amount of technical lessons that I'm going to plug into structured courses a month. I would like to do X amount of things on the website a month, that kind of a thing. Those to me are realistic goals. By the same token, another thing I'd like to do is I would love to be able to do this for a living. I could get so much more done if I didn't have to go to work, right? Or if going to work for me was working on Il Tavolo Italiano. It would be such a passion, it wouldn't even be work for me. It would be wonderful. It's like I could say, I want to make a living off Il Tavolo Italiano. I want to get so many new subscribers a month, and I want to make X amount of dollars a month from the ad revenues that are created by people clicking on the ads, on the videos, or on the pages. I can't control that. There's no way I can control that. So instead, once again, my goal is I want to be able to put out so much material a month in order to help people. I want to be able to respond to the messages and the emails I get within a certain amount of time. And those are realistic goals, or can be realistic goals, shaped into realistic goals. Although I got to be honest, I haven't always hit them. And that's the only other thing about goals I want to tell you is I would start with shorter time frames. Set a goal for the next month, the next 3 months, the next 6 months. And if you fall down on your goal, it doesn't wipe out the objective, just means you missed your goal. Set another one, get back up, and go for it, okay? So some goals, some of them I already mentioned. Here are some potential goals. To study X amount of minutes a day or X amount of hours per week on Italian. Once again, I don't know if I mentioned this in an earlier video, but I would highly recommend that you study at least a little bit every day, as opposed to trying to designate 1 or 2 days a week. Language is a little bit like a musical instrument. It's not something that you can cram for, okay? So now if you want to wrap up the week or start the week or somewhere in the week, give a boost by having a huge window of opportunity and time to study, that's great. But don't rely just on that. Make sure you have a little bit every day. Try to write something on a social dual language site, like for instance, the Il Tavolo Italiano Facebook group, X amount of times a week. Practice is critically important. And from the being realistic part, don't be afraid to make mistakes. That's okay. In fact, I found that mistakes are my greatest opportunity to learn. And so practice it. And start off by practicing writing something on the Il Tavolo site, or another social networking site where you have both Italians and Americans. That could be a goal. To practice speaking what I know in Italian to myself daily for at least X amount of time. And this is something, we'll go into all these. These are kind of part of the how-tos. So we're really going to dig deeper into these. So I guess I should stop expounding on them. This video is already going to be long, I know. Mi dispiace. To try to learn X amount of words a week or X amount of words a month. To watch X amount of instructional videos per week, or to watch one video per week X amount of times. To read an instructional book, to do an online lesson, to have X amount of tutoring lessons, etc. These are things you can control. To find X amount of resources, next video, we'll be talking about what resources are available to help teach you Italian. These are goals that you can control to a great degree. Okay? These are the kinds of things that I would recommend that you set as goals because you can control them. And if you start meeting these goals on a regular basis, your objectives will begin to materialize, okay? So you're setting yourself up for success. If you just put, I want to be fluent in 2 years, and you don't hit it, or 3 months from now, how do you say I want to be 10% fluent? How do you measure that, right? You can't measure that. You don't know if you're hitting your goals. And so 3 months from now, you feel like you're getting nowhere. You may think that you have a realistic view of where you're at, but in reality, you probably don't. You may actually be ahead of schedule and not know it. How do you measure that? So I believe you take your objective, you look at your objective, and then you break it down into smaller chunks. And then you see if you're hitting those, and your objective will become clearer and become closer as you move on. So I hope that this helped. So in quick summary, 3 things. To figure out, look back, why? What's driving my desire to learn Italian? Well, why do I want to learn it? Just because it's beautiful? Is there a specific time that you want to learn what you want to learn by? Just what's driving your desire to learn Italian? And then, what would be my objective? You can't measure all the work that's going to go into that objective. And like I said, it's okay to change it later. So right now, if all things equal, if the world was a perfect place and everything went right for you, what would you like to do with that Italian? What's my end objective? And then, what kind of goals could I set? Those are just a few things. And don't think about right now, is this goal on par for the schedule in which I want to accomplish my objective? That you'll be refining continually. Because it's really hard to measure that right now. So remember those 3 things. Start, just write down why you wanted to learn Italian. Set your objective. And then set your first few goals. And then we'll start applying those goals next video as we start talking about the how-tos. So thank you very much for watching this video. I really appreciate all the support and encouragement I've gotten over this series. Thank you very, very much. Hope it's been helping you. Ciao. E parlo italiano.